Well, greetings to each of you, and welcome to the Shakedown, a podcast about corrections, for corrections, and by corrections. Good to be with each of you again this week. Hope that your week is going well, and looking forward to having another opportunity to interact with you here in this medium, continuing in our series on sharpening skills. I hope that the episodes that we have done thus far in this idea and frame of reference they've been enjoyable, but also hope they've been informative to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed the guests that we've been able to interview on this series. Tickled to death to have Sean Stewart and Keith Hoskins on with us. I hope that they were able to share some things again, beneficial and enjoyable to you. Looking forward to new guest. One I do not believe that we have had on the podcast thus far, Mr. Josh Arnold. He is the Vice President of Operations with the National Institute for Jail Operations, but also a former corrections officer, also one who started as a line officer and worked his way up through the ranks, retiring as a captain, jail administrator. So looking forward to our conversation with him. But before we jump into that, I want to make mention, especially as we're talking about sharpening skills, if you have not and are not making use of Dakota, that would be NIJO's online corrections academy. I strongly recommend that you check that out. You can go to jailtraining.org and you can follow the links there to look at Dakota, a wealth of knowledge provided by a variety of instructors. That there, you could attend conference after conference, training after training, and still not be exposed to the amount of information that is covered in Dakota. So if you are not familiar with or have not made use of, I recommend that you check that out. If your agency is not making use of Dakota, you might want to mention that to your supervisor or your jail administrator, and to your administration, and say, hey, look, I know that training budgets are tight. I know that travel budgets may be tight or non-existent. How about we do some training right here at home on an individual basis? It's all done online, and so it's something that is very accessible and is very financially doable in a lot of cases. So I strongly recommend you check out Dakota. Like I said, you can do that at jailtraining.org. Also, as far as the podcast is concerned, if you're enjoying this podcast and the topics and the things that we're talking about, pass the information on. Let people know, whether it be corrections officers that you work with there at your agency or folks that you know that work in other agencies, pass that information on. Let them know about it. And, they can find it at the shakedown.org, or they can find it at YouTube, search the Shakedown podcast, and they can view it there. So get the word out there. Let people know. The whole point in doing this is to be a benefit to as many people as possible. If you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, please shoot us an email at shakedown@jailtraining.org, and we will definitely will enjoy that interaction with you. But enough about that. As I said before, tickled to death and honored to have Mr. Josh Arnold with us on the podcast today. So, without further ado, let's get to that interview. All right. Well, as promised, ladies and gentlemen, have the illustrious Josh Arnold on with us today. I will tell you, thoroughly have enjoyed the time that I have gotten to spend with Josh over the years, but he is one of the few people that I can say that I have had on the podcast that I've actually had the privilege of staying in his home. That is a short list. And by the way, if you're looking for a house in which you will not starve, that man's house is the place. But that's beside the point. That has nothing to do with anything. But
it hasn't been good for my waistline, Aaron. I'll tell you that much.
Well, Josh, I'm tickled to have you on with us, and glad you were willing to pry yourself away from the workload that is your responsibilities with NIJO. But good to have you on, especially as
Good to
we
be here.
and I talked to everybody prior to us starting the interview, kind of letting them know that you're not just a talking head that has ideas about corrections, that you started way down on the bottom at night shift and worked your way up through the ranks and had the opportunity to end your career as an administrator, whether you consider that a privilege or purgatory, however you want to view that.
Yeah.
But anyway, but obviously bringing that experience to the table makes a big difference. But something that you offer, that you can bring to the table that a lot of folks can, is that because with your work with NIJO, you get to tour and do inspections of jails all over the country. So it's not just Arizona jails that or that you've seen. You've seen them both coasts and across through the middle. So I was curious if there were some things that, when you're doing these inspections, or maybe it's just you're touring a jail, whatever the case may be, due to your experience, number one, but two, being able to compare all these jails that you've seen, were there some things that jumped out that, you're just standing there as an observer, you don't know anybody there from Adam's house cat, and just listening and watching and seeing, there's some things that you think, man, if they only knew this, that might make a big difference.
I tell you what, Aaron, I have been fortunate to travel kind of the country and either doing operational assessments or accreditations or just touring facilities and asking a lot of questions. I've been blessed and I've been fortunate, to go to facilities all around the country. I tell you what, one thing that almost every facility I've been into has in common is we are short-staffed. That is
Right.
that is a common theme everywhere, and I tell them all, please don't feel bad. You are not alone in the corrections industry. There are a huge number of jails that are just critically short-staffed, and I will say, in my close to 30 years experience in corrections, I have not, again, we always deal with staff shortages. It happens now and then, and usually it's just kind of a roller coaster. It's either feast or famine as far as staffing goes. But
right.
Just this last year or two, I have not seen the staffing shortages as acute as they are now in facilities all around the country. A lot of facilities are just trying to survive. They are just trying to keep their heads above water. And sometimes, unfortunately, that means, some security things just go out the window, Aaron. They're just trying to keep the wheels moving. They're trying to keep the inmates fed and going to court and just doing those operational things that they have to do, and just trying to keep their head above water. And that's what I see in a lot of places around the country is just that acute short-staffed and the problems that brings about.
Yeah, and the thing that that scares me from a looking back as an administrator, but also now that I'm on the other side of it and thinking about folks, whether I know them or don't, but they're in those facilities, is that when the staff gets that short, you have to balance, okay, something's going to get cut. So what is going to get cut? And I fear that, and it's a gamble. It's always a gamble. Today, this is no big deal. So, okay, well, we'll focus on this. But tomorrow, that thing you cut yesterday may be the very thing that is going to end you up in federal court in 6 months to a year. And how do you defend that?
Right. No, absolutely. And that's kind of the unique position that corrections is, once corrections, we are the masters of duct tape and WD-40, of just making things work, with what we got. And sometimes, Aaron, man, we're our own worst enemies because we just make it happen. No matter what, we make the operation go on. But while we're critically short-staffed, we got to think to ourselves, what kind of things aren't we doing? We're not doing the routine shakedowns we probably ought to be doing. We're not doing that training, that required training that we need to keep our officers fresh. We're starting to cut corners in the operation. We're trying to do things faster instead of better. Security is not convenient. And so we're taking all these shortcuts. And then unfortunately, you get your boards and your commission, the people that are in charge of the purse strings. And once you've made it happen for so long, you've been real short for a year, they think to themselves, well, gosh, you've been doing it this long with that many staff. Why can't you keep going? And they don't realize, hey, man, we're not doing those things that we really ought to be doing. And again, when that notice of claim hits your door and something bad happens, that's not when you want to find out, well, gosh, maybe we ought to make staffing a priority. Maybe we ought to get folks in here. Maybe these things need to happen. And that's a lot of what I'm seeing, around the country is kind of that attitude. And you try and explain, when you're short staffed, a lot of times you're keeping inmates locked down. Well, what do inmates, how does their behavior, what happens when you keep inmates locked down for long periods of time and they don't get out for day room and they can't call their honey, they can't call, they can't do those things. Well, they act out more. They tend to assault staff more often. They attempt suicide more often. They become angrier. They become more unpredictable. It exacerbates mental health issues, which is already a huge problem in facilities. And so, that's something that it's imperative on corrections facilities to get those folks, that are holding the purse strings to understand. Listen, short term, we can cinch the buckle and make it happen, but short term cannot become the status quo and what we do day in and day out, because it just doesn't work.
Right. I can very clearly remember telling the sheriff multiple times that, making it work, that can never be a long-term plan. I mean,
absolutely.
that's going to be a problem 100% of the time. So in the, as you've traveled, as you've toured, as you've seen these jails and you're standing there, you're watching, you're asking questions, you're counting heads, and you realize, wow, for this size facility and these number of inmates, I'm not counting enough heads. Understanding that they're having to play that gamble of, okay, we've got to cut something. Just in your observation, what would you say might be some of the skills that are probably the most important to keep sharp, keep it happening? The things, if you will, that, okay, we're not going to be able to train on all of this. We're only going to be able to train on these few things. What would those things be? Especially, let's say line officers, what would be something that you would think that these are the have-tos?
Right. I tell you what, as far as your line staff have to realize that, inmates are always watching you. Inmates are always trying to find a weakness, trying to find a hole in whatever you're doing. And so as an officer, I always tried to tell myself, man, I don't want to be that weak link. I don't want to be the officers that the inmates get over on, the inmates take advantage of, because they find a weakness. And my gosh, as short a staff this place is, I always talk about that 5-second pat search. If you're completing a pat search in 5 seconds or less, it's probably not a real good pat search to what you're doing. Sure. But you got to realize inmates are watching that. Inmates are looking which officers do the thorough pat searches and which don't. And so, if they want to smuggle that contraband out, if they want to try and get over on somebody, they're going to pick you out because you do that nice 3-second pat search that you just, across the legs, down the torso, and gosh, next, and so they're watching for those things. And that's not just with pat searches, but that's everything you do. As a corrections officer, I would just tell myself, listen, man, I know security isn't convenient. Sometimes, I've got to take more time, and that's not easy to do. When all the duties and responsibilities are stacked up, you're working mandatory overtime and everything else. It's really difficult sometimes, to take that step back and say, listen, I need, if I'm going to do a pat search, I've got to do it right. I can't just, I can't take shortcuts. I can't have it. We had a situation in the jail I worked at, is we have a release procedure. A release procedure, it's a little bit of a pain in the backside, to be honest with you. It is, but why do we do it? Well, we want to make sure we're cutting loose the right person. We can't, if we're gonna cut loose, Joe Smith, who got busted on his first DUI, we want to make sure we let Joe Smith out and not Hannibal Lecter, that's a terror to the community. And so there's a reason we have all these steps that we take. Well, I'm in Tucson, Arizona. I'm in about an hour away from the Mexican border, and we had a Jose Rodriguez get released.
Okay.
I cannot count the number of Jose Rodriguez's we have, and it's an extremely common name. Sure. One of the parts of our release procedures, Aaron, is you are supposed to fingerprint and get confirmation that that is the correct person that you're releasing. Well, gosh, you know what? Sometimes that machine just gets a little slow, and my God, I'm sure it's the right Jose Rodriguez, right?
Yeah.
And so by golly, they cut him loose without checking, and sure enough, it was the wrong Jose Rodriguez. And you go back and you're going, and you're listening, why, there's a reason we have these in place. Now, you've given the jail a black eye, you've given our department a black eye, you've given our sheriff a black eye, because, again, we cut loose the wrong Jose Rodriguez, really? And so, you ask him, what was going on? Well, I got real busy. I was working a double shift, and I just wanted to get back to what I was doing. And I had a lot of releases. They take a lot of time. And so, again, don't be that person. Don't be that gal or guy that takes shortcuts and just tries to get it done. And it's tempting to do, and it's easy for me to stand up here and preach to the choir, but it's a lot harder, after you're on the tail end of a double shift, trying to get things done so you can go home and finally get some rest and go back to your family. But you got to set it in your mind that you don't want to be that officer that gives your facility that black eye. You don't want to be that officer that the inmates are looking, and it's like, wow, look, we can get things through that person.
Oh yes. And often, I'd come out of my office and you have inmate workers wandering around or whatever. And, there, as there's some of them, they're more than willing to tell you anything you want to know if you'll just ask.
Right.
And you could just ask them, say, hey, if you're trying to get something back in the building, you're coming off a work release. Which shift is working when you want to bring it back in? Oh, Warden, come on now. I was like, no. I know it's in the dorm. So why don't you go ahead and do me a favor and just tell me, what shift? He's, well, I don't want to implicate an officer. Don't implicate an officer. Tell me what shift.
Right. Yeah.
Because they know good and well that, you do it on this one, hung out to dry. You do it on this one. Oh, absolutely. I can get it through whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, they're studying, they're picking those officers out that, take shortcuts or don't do what they're supposed to do or get, they are masters at targeting those officers. And I just told myself, I don't want to be that officer, man. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the one they pick out. That's the weak link, so.
Yes. And especially, and that one time that you decide, I'm going to cut that corner. It's the one time they decide to be, and now you look like, or I look like, that's my normal mode of operation, when in reality, that is not my normal mode of operation. But now I look like it because I cut that corner and took that opportunity.
Murphy's Law always hits. Absolutely.
It does.
Absolutely.
Does. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. So, as far, so definitely searching, no question about that. and the details. Is there anything else that maybe you've noticed just standing there watching that maybe from a line officer perspective that just kind of jumped out at you?
Oh, everything from, when you're escorting inmates, sometimes you get a little complacent and you walk side by side with all, instead of staying behind that inmate, 2 or 3
Yeah.
feet. So you have that, tactical advantage. I notice, and sometimes, gosh, I've been to facilities where they walk side by side down the hall and they're having a conversation, just like they're cousins, and they're just, they're just, sometimes when something doesn't happen for a while, everything's great until something does happen, and then it's not great anymore. And so, you tend to become just a little bit complacent, a little bit, a little bit lackadaisical. I got a video from a jail, north central United States. I won't get too specific, but they sent me a video of a use of force, and there's 3 officers. 3 officers are trying to get this inmate to go back into a cell. And this inmate's refusing to go to a cell. And you can tell there's no audio in there, but you can tell by the body language, Aaron, that he's upset, that he's irate. He's kind of throwing his hands up and such. And the officers are trying to calm him down. You can tell, the good IPC skills are going on, and they're trying to de-escalate. Well, finally it comes to the point, and you can tell kind of one officer's kind of taking charge there. He kind of comes to a point, he goes, listen, you need to get into that cell, we're done talking. And he still refuses. And so he goes, okay, he goes, you need to cuff up. And he doesn't cuff the inmate behind the back. He cuffs the inmate up front, which normally if somebody's non-compliant, you want to cuff that inmate behind the back. Well, he cuffs him up front. And he starts, okay, let's go. And the guy goes, well, where am I going? He goes, well, you're going to disciplinary and for, refusal to follow an order. And he resists. He ends up getting those cuffs. He gets up behind the officer and he starts choking the officer with his cuffs. And the officer's lucky because he got his hands underneath, the chain link on the cuffs, and he's fighting. And they're on the floor rolling around. And there are these 2 other officers. I wish I could say that they were brand new officers, fresh off the turnip truck, Aaron, and they just kind of froze and they didn't know what to do, but they were 12 and 15-year veterans, and again, nothing like that had happened in so long. They didn't know what to do. One of them starts kind of grabbing the inmate and trying to pull him off him, but it's not work because this inmate's strong, and this inmate's got it cinched in, really well. And the officer screaming, telling him, get the taser, get the taser. Now, they don't have tasers issued in that jail, but they have one in the unit that's secured. And they both are just still trying to pull the guy off. And finally a response comes. But, at the end of it, that poor officer that's getting choked, he didn't want to kill the inmate. He wanted to kill the 2 officers that weren't helping him. And, it ends up that those 2 officers hadn't had any defensive tactics training for forever and a day. So they didn't know, well, my gosh, at least grab your pressure points. And my gosh, but if you have a fellow officer in danger, a fist strike to the head will do quite nicely. My gosh, you are authorized to use an extreme level of force if you think that an officer's life is in danger. These guys didn't know. They hadn't gone through any training. They hadn't played that what if game, Aaron. And then when the time came, they didn't know what to do. They froze. And these guys were veterans. These guys should have known what to do. But again, nothing like that had happened in so long. They just didn't think about it. Everything became routine, and that's the danger we kind of face in corrections. Is every day is a good day. Every day is routine until it's not. And so it's those incidents like that kind of wake everybody up, and but again, it shouldn't take an incident like that. We've all got to be vigilant. We've all got to make sure that in our minds, we're playing that what if games. And that's what I always encourage officers to do. Even if you're out and you're watching housing units, okay, what am I going to do if these two inmates are sitting at a table playing cards? What am I going to do if they start fighting? What am I going to do if one of those inmates is about to kill the other one because the fight's going bad for one of them? What am I going to do? Play those what if games. What if I walk by a cell and there's an inmate hanging? What do I need to do? What are the steps I need to take? What do I and I find honestly that just the process of playing that what if game, when the incident happens, it helps so much. You have something to fall back on. You're not just saying, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I got to think fast, think fast, think fast. You've got, okay, wow. Okay, I just thought about this a couple weeks ago. Okay, I need to call for assistance. I need to get medical. I need to, and you start knowing what those steps are. But officers, a lot of them don't tend to, play that what if game, and that's what I really encourage folks to do. And especially, my gosh, working the tail end of a double shift and you're tired and you're ready to go home. And, that's Murphy's Law is when something's going to happen. Right when you're at your worst, right when you're, it can't be, your first day off your weekend when you're fresh and you're ready, you're ready for the day. It's got to be on your Friday when you're about ready to go home, and that's when everything ends up popping off. So
awesome. And so very true. So very true. And it's we had an incident that I'll say I was aware of. You had an inmate that attempted to hang themselves, and the officer in the tower panicked, like you said, didn't know what to do. And in the conversation, there's a manual sitting less than 3 feet from him, which has it outlined that he has read, has been trained on, has articulated verbally. But like you said, once the class was finished, oh, well, I'm done with the class. Yep. It's out. I ain't got to worry about it anymore. I'm doing until it came up where, hey, I need this. And now I don't know what to do. So absolutely. And, I think you and I have discussed this before, that though training can be difficult to arrange, get somebody there, the cost of it, the travel, so forth and so on. As an officer, me playing that what if game, I'm taking care of it myself. I mean, not completely, but
right.
I'm making sure that I'm thinking through the process that if this happens, I'm ready to do this, or this, so forth and so on.
Yeah, and if an officer's playing that what if game, and then they run into a curveball and go, well, gosh, what if that did happen? Well, I don't know what I do. What? That's when you go, hey, Sarge, or hey, Corporal.
Right.
If just hypothetically, if this happened in my housing unit, or if I ran into this, what would be? I'm thinking this is what I should do. Am I off, or are we good here? That's the time when you can ask questions. Then not when it hits the fan and it's all in your lap, and it's like, oh, and so that what if game is a real valuable tool. I always just go through your mind. You don't have to. It doesn't necessarily take a full-blown drill to learn things, although drills are very good and you ought to be doing them. But it doesn't necessarily take that for that line staff, for that officer, to make sure that they're sharpening their tools and they know what to do, and when disaster strikes, they'll be ready for it.
Yes. Well, I can't say that I can think of much more that we could add to that thought process. So awesome. I appreciate that. The simplicity of something like that it, again, doesn't take a lot of funding, doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take any travel whatsoever. It's something that I can take responsibility for. You can take my own in that. So awesome. So Josh, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Guys, I hope that was that got your wheels rolling, got you thinking. If you enjoyed this conversation, do not be dismayed. We're gonna pick up again. Looking forward to having Josh back with us again next week. If you're enjoying this beautiful face that is on this screen right now, and I mean mine too, then do not be dissuaded. We'll do that again. But again, Josh, appreciate you being with us. Looking forward to our next conversation. And guys, in the meantime, as always, stay sharp.
Appreciate you having me, Eric.
Yes, sir. And y'all, Godspeed.